Okay, I'm going to read this. Tell me if it's true, first of all. The premise is that the Second Amendment was created to condone slave patrols. So why are not the alt-right snowflakes understanding that? Is that true? I always assumed it had to do with, well, if the king is taxing you and you don't want to be taxed, then you can take up arms to avoid paying your taxes.
See, that's never been my understanding of why the Second Amendment was in place. The Constitution is filled with all variety of checks and balances. You've got these three different branches of government, and you have federal governments, and you have federal government and the state government. You have the House and the Senate. You've got choke points all throughout the government. Regular elections in order to spread power around to prevent the formation of some type of tyranny. I don't think that the idea behind the Second Amendment was for people to attack their own for people to attack their own government. There were checks put in place to develop that, and if they didn't like the form of government that they had, they knew that they had a way to create a new one, a constitutional convention. And this was not theoretical. They had already tried the Articles of Confederation. It wasn't working out to everybody's satisfaction. They came together and they came up with the new federal system of the Constitution. At the time, they were defending their country against the indigenous population that they were in the process of wiping out through genocide. Also were facing French troops who had been their allies, but you never know how long they're going to be their allies, Spanish troops in Mexico. And the British had left and had surrendered, but you never know if they're gone for good. And sure enough, just 20-some years later, the War of 1812, the country's at war again with Britain. So I think the idea here was that the revolution was won by militias. Militias are the thing that gave this government its power against its outside rivals. And so in order to maintain those well-regulated militias, all people ought to have guns, and you don't want some type of federal government that gets too comfortable kind of taking people's guns, because then you might get invaded by Britain and you're screwed. So I don't think that guns are put into the Constitution as a check against the federal government. Even if they were, it's moot at this point. The federal government has nuclear weapons. It has million-plus person standing army. Like the idea, in 1789, federal government's got muskets and we've got muskets. They got a bayonet, we got a bayonet. Like, okay, we can even if you do believe that it's set up to go toe to toe. That's not the case anymore. Federal government's got everything it needs to crush you in a couple of days.
Okay, I apologize to the person who had this comment. It got buried by other people's questions and comments. But what she was saying was the real problem is that outside interests can contribute within a congressional district. So if the NRA was not allowed to buy, that's the term she used, politicians outside of Arlington or Fairfax, Virginia, we wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah, the problem there is, okay, but then who else are you shutting down? You're shutting down you're shutting down the Sierra Club, Justice Democrats, Move On, every political group that wants to have some say in how the country is organized. Secondly, don't get fooled. The NRA's power does not come anymore from the money that it spends. I think somebody was saying, look,
Rubio said that last night.
Okay, well,
he said that it's not because they're paying us, it's because our constituents vote for us based on our stance on gun rights.
And it's not just the stance on gun rights anymore. The NRA has, in a twisted way, become a proxy for real conservative. The left doesn't have anything like this because I think it's the left is a coalition of different groups. So like getting the Sierra Club endorsement on the left doesn't necessarily mean that you are the left candidate. Now, something like Justice Democrats or Our Revolution is actually getting closer to that idea because it's supposed to encompass kind of a full range of policies on which you're strongly progressive on all of them. But it's harder on the left because it's a coalition of different groups, whereas on the right, it's white people. And so...
Wait, not just white people. It's white people who have racial anxiety about are changing demographics plus really, really rich
Right,
people.
but they're all white people for the most part.
Right, but not all white people fit
Not-
that description.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure. There's some white people are Democrats. Anyway, so the NRA endorsement now in a Senate race or a House race or a mayor's race, or, well, there's not a lot of mayor's races because cities are Democratic, but you get the picture. If you get the NRA's endorsement, you don't need a dime from them. It is an extremely valuable coinage to go out and say, I'm the candidate endorsed by the NRA. And what a busy voter hears from that is that I can trust that is the most conservative candidate in the race, and they're the one that deserves my support. And so talking about the NRA's money flows confuses the issue. And in fact, the gun manufacturer money flows too are minuscule. Like if you just go Google like what the market caps of these gun companies are, they're small, and the number of jobs that they produce in the country is tiny. So it's not about the traditional metrics that you might think of when it comes to political power. It's raw power, and it's signaling that, and that's why when you watch an NRA TV or these NRA videos, you finish like, what does that have to do with guns? It's just crazy fascist nonsense coming out of their YouTube channel that oftentimes barely even mentions guns at all. Just this like uber nationalist kind of like proto-fascist ideology that they have become identified with, and that's what their endorsement means, rather than this is a person who fights on gun issues. But because every Republican votes the same on gun issues.
A woman named Jerry cites the assault weapons ban from the 90s. She says it had no impact. Is that true?
I don't know the academic research on it. It lapsed. We had a lot of shootings.
It lapsed in what year?
Was it 2004? It was
Okay.
Was it a 10-year ban or something?
Because the one that really shook me, Columbine, I was not really that politically aware, but it was Virginia Tech, and I believe that was 2007.
Yeah.
And then it's just accelerated from there.
Right.
So I don't know if it had an impact, but taking it away seemed to have an impact.
I don't know. I mean, part of it is that they've gotten great at marketing and selling guns. The Obama years were incredible for gun manufacturers. The number of guns that are circulating in the country may have even doubled. I mean, somebody can look that up, but like, it's not Obama's fault. But people thought that, Obama's going to take all our guns, we better buy them all now. Gun stocks went through the roof, and people who used to buy. And you see this, like there's one gun for every man, woman, child in America. That's because people who get big into guns have like 50 guns.
Mm-hmm. Jamie Robinson's challenging your analogy to car operation.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're agreeing actually on that. And so if you look at, and if any of you are experts on how Australia has handled this, a lot of what they did is they focused on the bureaucracy of controlling who had access to weapons, rather than saying, these are the particular guns that people can have, and these are the particular guns that people cannot have. And if you think about it in this direction, the kid who shot up MDS High School and murdered 17 people, does anybody believe that kid should have had even a 6-shooter or anything else? Like the idea, okay, yes, you don't want him to have an assault weapon. Nobody wants him to have an assault weapon. I don't want him to have any weapon whatsoever. And if you put restrictions in place in who can get weapons, he's the kind of person who is not going to be able to pass whatever exams and trainings you set up in front of him. And so if the NRA is serious when the NRA says that guy should not have had access to weapons, then put that into law. Say, okay, well then in order for him to have legal access to weapons, he has to go through XYZ. And I don't believe that he would have.
So this guy named Gorin, I'm not sure where he stands, but he's pointing out that Australia bought back the assault weapons after they had a gun massacre many years ago, and there hasn't been one since. But he also pointed out the number 300 million guns. How on earth would those get? I mean, they're just not going to get bought back.
I mean, if you could pull in a lot of them, but yeah, there are a lot out there now because the culture is so violent, and because there are already more than 300 million guns that have swamped this country. You could stop producing guns today, and this is a problem that we'll be dealing with for the rest of our lives. Oh yeah, Joshua Halbig. What about the fact that guns contribute to very few deaths compared to all other means? Not if you count what the CDC calls accidental deaths. In 2016, I think 22,000 people died by gun suicide, and it's a thing that is not talked about anywhere near as much as it should be because people justifiably don't want to talk about suicide. But if you have a gun in the house, or if you have access to a gun, your likelihood of committing suicide goes up radically because it is a decision that you can make in 2 seconds, execute on it, and it's over. 22,000 people in 2016, according to the CDC, killed themselves with firearms. Many, many, many thousands of those would never have committed suicide if they didn't have access to this weapon. It's often linked with drunkenness. Around 10,000 or 11,000 firearm deaths through homicide. So twice as many people are killed through suicide with firearms than are killed by guns. But still, 10,000 is an extraordinary amount of people getting killed every year.
I just Googled this. The U.S., I mean, are we that many times more crazy than all of those other countries?
I mean, we're a little crazier, but we're not that crazier.
Australia's at the bottom there, 1.4 if you can't read it
right
on your phones, and
right.
we're at 29.
So, right, it is possible.
Homicides by firearms per 1 million people in selected developed countries. Per 1 million, 29.7
Right,
for
and
us.
these countries make you go through a rigorous process in order to get access to weapons. We don't. We think about going through a rigorous process in order to restrict access, but you should go through the funnel the other direction.
You know, when I was younger, I used to get a lot of speeding tickets, and I was really annoyed about, they took away my license for 6 months, and, this is in California, and having car insurance. I got in trouble for that, not having car insurance when I got in an accident. I was really annoyed. I was young and stupid. I was like, the government is trying to make me pay to own my own car, to prove that I have insurance, to not drive like a maniac and crash every 6 months? Oh, man, stupid government. I got over that. But, if my masculinity was somehow attached to having a car.
Right. And so I think the answer is to say, all right, what gun safety movement, and the liberals have kind of rebranded gun control as gun safety in an effort to win over these moderate Republicans towards some common ground, like background checks or something that they could come around to, and it simply has not worked. You have not been able to persuade Republicans to move 1 inch on gun control. So instead of trying to persuade them anymore, design the system that is going to save the most amount of lives, rally Democrats and independents behind it, go out and throw the Republicans out of the seats, and then replace them with people who are already persuaded that this is a better system to implement, rather than trying to go to Marco Rubio and saying, hey, look, we hear what you're saying. Let's try to tweak this here or that. But I should get going for now. Thanks, guys, for the thoughtful questions. More to come on this in the future.